Formula One's biggest teams are at war over a bitter dispute that could have massive consequences for future seasons. The FIA is close to announcing whether teams complied with the first ever budget cap in 2021, but it has already been widely discussed in the F1 paddock that the governing body has decided 2 teams have breached it. Red Bull is furious that it has been openly talked about as one of those teams and has threatened to take legal action against Mercedes and Ferrari for comments made over the Singapore Grand Prix weekend. While it may seem odd to be talking about last year's finances this late in 2022, that's because it's been a complicated and delayed process, and the fallout from this could be absolutely huge. F1's first budget cap was introduced in 2021 with a baseline level of $145 million and extra payments made for sprint races and if there were more than 21 Grand Prix. There are various exemptions, but it forced F1's biggest teams, Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari, to scale down their operations and put a greater emphasis on efficiency and financial management than ever before. 2021 was an especially significant year for the introduction of the new financial regulations because in addition to getting through that season, teams were having to manage the development of brand new 2022 cars built to completely different regulations. All teams have now submitted their accounts for 2021, and while the FIA is still finalising the process, it is understood to be aware of 2 breaches. This has not been officially discussed, but Red Bull and Aston Martin have been named in the paddock as the 2 teams involved. What's more, the likes of Mercedes boss Toto Wolff have openly talked about one breach being relatively small and the other being much bigger. We understand that both are expected to be classified by the FIA as minor breaches, which means they exceeded the budget cap by less than 5% of its value. For 2021, this means the breach could be up to around $7 million, which is the equivalent of salary for 70 members of engineering staff, or according to Mercedes and Ferrari, about double a full year's worth of development. While that would be at the upper end of what was rumoured in Singapore, even a breach below that would still potentially provide a crucial advantage. Red Bull did battle with Mercedes for both titles in 2021 and won the Drivers' Championship with Max Verstappen in a controversial Abu Dhabi finale that we are definitely not going to go over again here. This season, Mercedes has struggled with the new rules, whereas Red Bull started the year fighting Ferrari for victories and has gradually eased away to put it comfortably on course to claim its first World Championship double since the final year of the V8 engine era in 2013. The rate and size of Red Bull's development this year has previously been noted by Ferrari, which has raised concerns about the robustness of the financial regulations more than once. Red Bull's rivals say that any potential unfair advantage from a 2021 breach could apply to multiple seasons depending on how the extra resource was deployed. And if teams had systems in place that allowed them to exceed the budget cap in 2021, there are some concerns that this could also mean a potential 2022 breach is on the cards, especially as the cost cap has reduced by a further $5 million this season and the expense for the new cars is so high. As we prepared this video, we understood no final decision had been made about what any punishment should be, and no team had been formally told if it had breached the budget cap. There is no specified penalty for a minor breach because the FIA wanted to avoid giving teams the option to decide if the penalty, financial or otherwise, was a price worth paying. The unlimited options available up to disqualification from the championship is designed to be the deterrent. The penalty options for a minor breach include a public reprimand, deduction of drivers' and constructors' championship points for 2021, suspension from one or more stages of a competition but not a race itself, limitations on ability to conduct aerodynamic or other testing, and/or a reduction in the following year's cost cap. This story is expected to move on in the coming days, so make sure you're subscribed to our channel and you don't miss how this explosive situation develops. Wolff did not explicitly state Red Bull breached the budget cap, but he did reference rumours that the team had done so and that it had been under investigation. Meanwhile, Ferrari team boss Mattia Binotto and sporting director Laurent Mekies commented about 2 teams committing offences as well and talked at length about the significance of this. Mid-weekend, the FIA was moved to issue a statement about the assessment of teams' 2021 financial data, in which it noted significant and unsubstantiated speculation and conjecture in relation to this matter, and it reiterated that the assessment is ongoing and due process will be followed without consideration to any external discussion. So this quickly spiraled out of control as far as the governing body was concerned, and the situation left Red Bull furious. When Red Bull team boss Christian Horner addressed the matter for the first time on Friday in Singapore, he was asked if he was aware of any breach and said certainly not aware of any. Horner stressed that Red Bull's submission was below the cap, but rivals contested that this was irrelevant. It's whether the FIA believes that the submission was accurate. As the weekend progressed, Horner's stance got stronger and his frustration increased. He said that the FIA's process of scrutinising the accounts had gradually pushed the final resolution date from July to September and now October. And when we asked him about comments from Mercedes and Ferrari, Horner demanded they be withdrawn or Red Bull would consider taking action. He called the comments fictitious and defamatory, and while he probably would like to deflame the situation, he obviously meant defamatory, and this is what the FIA's official press conference transcript recorded him as saying. Horner said Red Bull lives and breathes by the financial regulations with every decision it makes and is absolutely confident we've complied with the cap. His frustration over the subject led him to question the impartiality of one journalist who asked which statements Horner was referring to with his accusation of defamation. In that answer, Horner claimed that this had been done cynically to detract from Verstappen's potential championship coronation in Singapore. Mercedes boss Wolff appeared nonplussed by Horner's hint of legal action and said everything that is being said at the moment is just noise. He might have a point, but let's continue with this video anyway. Wolff did, however, indicate that it would be wise for teams to avoid speaking too much, while also stating there's two top teams that are just about the same in terms of their car development over the last 2 seasons, and there's another team that spends more. Meanwhile, Ferrari team boss Binotto continued to bang the drum about the significance of potential breaches, even though he avoided talking about Red Bull specifically. So clearly Horner's comments didn't deter his rivals, and they also paid little attention to Verstappen's suggestion that other teams should just keep their mouths shut. Ignoring who may or may not have breached the budget cap, the fact is the new financial regulations were always due a first major test. F1's first ever cost cap has cut back what the top teams spend, and a more condensed financial spread is key to the championship's vision for a more level playing field. The FIA's ability to police the financial regulations is at the core of whether they can be sustained and has been questioned several times since the budget cap was first proposed. Without strong reinforcement, it would collapse, just like the doomed resource restriction agreement did around a decade ago. When the new financial regulations were announced in late 2019, F1 Managing Director of Motorsport Ross Brawn was adamant that this would be different because the previous attempt was basically a gentleman's agreement, whereas this time the regulations have teeth. We are now very close to finding out the precedent the FIA will set, and as Ferrari's Laurent Mekies put it, this is the vital first test. If F1 doesn't pass it, then it's probably game over for the budget cap. If, as expected, any breach is only a minor one, then whichever teams are involved will not be disqualified from the 2021 season. That's viewed in the paddock as an unlikely scenario anyway and considered too drastic. Interfering with a previous championship result is envisaged as a worst-case scenario option, likely saved for the most egregious offences. But if a minor breach that could still be millions of dollars is committed, then a reprimand would make a mockery of the process, and suspending the team in question from a stage of a competition would have no merit either. Missing out on some practice time or even a qualifying session would probably be viewed worth it if a team feels it got a huge benefit from spending over the limit. If interfering with past results is to be avoided, that just leaves limiting aerodynamic testing and a reduction in the cost cap in the future. That means, for example, giving a team less wind tunnel time and reducing future budget caps, perhaps a value equal to its offence. While that sounds a bit like a bank robber just having to give back the money if they get caught, the feeling within the F1 paddock is that combined with the aerodynamic testing restrictions, it would cause any offending team a lot of pain in the future. Reducing offenders' aero testing and spending power, perhaps allied with an extremely severe suspended penalty to warn against a future breach, is probably the most effective outcome. It doesn't mess with an existing result, it doesn't interfere with the current competitive picture, and it allows the teams to continue competing, but imposes a tangible competitive punishment that would match the crime. As this is all still up in the air at this stage, make sure you let us know in the comments what you think a fair punishment would be. Looking ahead, a scale exists so the FIA can come down hard on teams that commit worse breaches. How this is handled could define the future of the budget cap. The whole point is that teams need to fear the outcome to avoid thinking a breach would be worth it. The first time we have a confirmed breach and a concrete punishment will either reinforce the regulations or blow the principle of the budget cap out of the water and potentially destroy F1's vision of a more equal, more competitive championship.